The prize for passengers was supposed to be life-changing, seeing firsthand the most iconic shipwreck in history, the Titanic.
In an unexpected discovery that's sending shockwaves around the world, a deep-sea submarine has uncovered Titanic's long-lost safes, sealed shut for long years. Hidden deep within the rusting remains of the legendary shipwreck, the mysterious vault has finally seen the light of day. For decades, treasure hunters and historians alike have speculated about its contents.
The wreckage was only discovered in 1985, and since then more than 5,000 artifacts have been retrieved from the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Many of them are kept in a warehouse in the US state of Georgia.
Could it be love letters, priceless jewels, or something no one ever expected? The truth, as it turns out, is more incredible than anyone imagined. What's inside will truly blow your mind. Treasures from the deep. Ever since the wreck of the Titanic was discovered in 1985, there's been an almost mythical curiosity surrounding what might still be lying down there on the ocean floor. People have long imagined hidden treasures sealed away in vaults, safes, and cargo crates, untouched for decades in the icy silence of the North Atlantic. The Titanic wasn't just a passenger ship. It was also a floating palace that carried wealthy travelers, valuable goods, and personal belongings. So naturally, when recovery missions started in the late 80s, the public was fascinated, especially by the idea of retrieving safes from the wreck. RMS Titanic, Incorporated, the company granted salvage rights to the Titanic, led many of these expeditions. They've been involved in recovering thousands of artifacts from the site over the years. One of their key goals was to recover safes, since these were seen as the places where the most exciting discoveries might be, potentially holding jewelry, gold, rare coins, cash, or even personal mementos from the ship's wealthiest passengers. The idea that you could open a safe that had been sealed since 1912 and maybe find a long-lost treasure sparked a lot of public imagination. What's mind-blowing? The truth turned out to be less glamorous. Everybody thought diamonds and countless golds would be recovered, but that wasn't what happened. Most of the safes that were recovered had been sitting deep in salt water for over 70 years by the time they were brought up. As you can imagine, the conditions down there aren't exactly friendly to metal or anything, really. The safes were badly corroded, and many were fragile by the time they were hauled to the surface. Despite this, a few were successfully opened, often under great public attention. The contents were always intriguing, but they didn't match the over-the-top expectations that many people had. One of the most famous moments in Titanic recovery history happened in 1987. During that expedition, a safe was brought up and opened live on television in a widely publicized event. The world watched eagerly, hoping to catch a glimpse of lost riches from a bygone era. Would it be filled with diamonds, gold bars, rare coins? Have a wild guess? Let's uncover the truth during the global occasion. When the safe was finally cracked open, though, what they found inside was wet paper money and a handful of coins. Some of the paper bills were US currency, while others were foreign, probably brought aboard by international passengers. They were waterlogged, faded, and fragile, but remarkably, still recognizable. To a collector or historian, those items were still valuable, not for the money itself, but for what they represented. They were time capsules. Each bill and coin had been touched and used by someone who boarded that ship, completely unaware of the tragedy that was to come. In that sense, these objects carried incredible emotional and historical weight. But in terms of financial value or the classic buried treasure image that people had in mind, it was a bit of a letdown. Over the years, other safes have been retrieved from the wreck, and the pattern has remained pretty consistent. Some of them did contain jewelry, rings, brooches, or necklaces, and many had personal documents like letters or receipts. All of these artifacts are important for understanding the daily lives of those who were aboard the Titanic. But again, none of the safes have revealed anything close to a massive treasure hoard. There's been no discovery of priceless diamonds, ancient relics, or piles of gold bars. That part, it seems, was more fiction than fact. But even without glittering treasure, there's something incredibly powerful about these findings. What makes them so meaningful isn't their market value. It's the connection they give us to the past. These items survived one of the most infamous maritime disasters in history. The fact that we can hold, display, and study them today is remarkable. It helps make the story of the Titanic feel more real and personal. Instead of being just a tragic event from over a century ago, the artifacts bring the passengers' experiences to life. Their hopes, their plans, their belongings. While the safes from the Titanic didn't turn out to be treasure chests filled with unimaginable wealth, they did give us something arguably more valuable: a deeper human connection to the people who were aboard that ship. The coins, the paper money, the bits of jewelry, all of it serves as a reminder that the Titanic story isn't just about a shipwreck. It's about the lives that were lost and the small, personal details they left behind. Yes, it's about the passengers, some who were just as wealthy as the world expected. Remember, it was a luxurious ocean liner. Owners of the safes. When the Titanic set sail, it wasn't just a ship carrying passengers. It was practically a floating city of dreams, packed with the hopes of immigrants, the elegance of high society, and yes, some of the richest people in the world at the time. The Titanic's first-class deck was famously luxurious, and the passenger list read like a who's who of early 20th century wealth and influence. Among those on board were some incredibly wealthy individuals, many of whom tragically did not survive the sinking. Topping the list was John Jacob Astor IV, probably the wealthiest passenger on the Titanic and one of the richest men in the world at that time. Astor was an American businessman, real estate magnate, and a member of the powerful Astor family. His fortune was estimated to be around $87 million in 1912, which would be more than $2.5 billion today when adjusted for inflation. Astor had built iconic buildings in New York, including the Astoria Hotel, which later became part of the Waldorf Astoria, and he was known for his inventions and his military service. He was 47 years old when he boarded the Titanic with his young, pregnant second wife, Madeline. While she survived, he tragically did not. He was last seen helping her into a lifeboat before stepping aside for others. Another enormously wealthy figure on board was Benjamin Guggenheim, an American mining tycoon and a member of the influential Guggenheim family, known for their art collections and philanthropy. He was worth around $4 million at the time, which would be around $120 million today. Guggenheim became somewhat of a legend for his composure during the disaster. As the ship was sinking, he famously changed into formal evening wear and was reported to have said, "We are dressed in our best and are prepared to go down like gentlemen." He and his valet died in the wreck, choosing dignity and calm in their final hours. Isidore Straus, another first-class passenger, was co-owner of Macy's department store and a former U.S. congressman. His net worth was estimated to be around $50 million in today's dollars. He was traveling with his wife, Ida, and their love story became one of the most memorable of the Titanic tragedy. When offered a place in a lifeboat, Ida refused to leave her husband's side. The couple was last seen sitting together on deck, arm in arm, choosing to face their fate together. Their story has been retold in many adaptations and memorials over the years as a symbol of love and loyalty. Another lesser-known but wealthy figure was George Dunton Widener, a Philadelphia businessman and heir to a streetcar fortune. His family was heavily involved in public transport and real estate. Widener's estimated worth was around $11 million, which translates to hundreds of millions today. He was traveling with his wife and son. Sadly, both George and his son perished in the sinking, although his wife survived and later donated libraries and buildings in their memory. It's also worth mentioning J. Bruce Ismay, the managing director of the White Star Line, the company that owned the Titanic. While he wasn't among the ultra-rich like Astor or Guggenheim, he was still an influential and wealthy man. Ismay survived the disaster by boarding one of the last lifeboats, but his reputation was permanently tarnished. Many accused him of cowardice, saying he should have gone down with the ship like the captain and other men of high status. Whether fair or not, his legacy was never the same afterward. The wealth carried on the Titanic is a fascinating lens through which to view the disaster. While the ship was a marvel of engineering and luxury, it also laid bare the brutal truths about class and inequality. Many of the wealthiest passengers had access to lifeboats simply because they were in first class, while hundreds of third-class passengers, many of whom were immigrants chasing a new life, never had a chance. Money may have bought luxury, but in the end, it couldn't buy survival. Loss of the company. It was considered one of the most luxurious and technologically advanced ships of its time. The ship was constructed by Harland and Wolff in Belfast, Ireland, and commissioned by the White Star Line, a major British amphibious shipping company. The total cost to build the Titanic was around $7.5 million at the time, which would be equivalent to roughly $200 million or more today when adjusted for inflation. That price tag covered its massive steel structure, opulent interiors, state-of-the-art safety features, ironically, and accommodations for both wealthy elites and lower-class passengers seeking new lives in America. The Titanic was meant to be a triumph for the White Star Line, a symbol of power and prestige that could compete with its rivals, particularly the Cunard Line. Instead, it became a financial and public relations disaster. When the ship sank on its maiden voyage in April 1912 after hitting an iceberg, more than 1,500 lives were lost. Beyond the tragic human cost, the company suffered a huge financial blow. While it's hard to calculate exactly how much the White Star Line lost, it's safe to say they didn't just lose the $7.5 million it cost to build the ship. They also lost revenue from future voyages, cargo that went down with the ship, and most significantly, their reputation. Lawsuits and public backlash followed, and while the company didn't go bankrupt right away, the Titanic disaster marked the beginning of its decline. Eventually, in 1934, White Star Line merged with Cunard due to financial difficulties that were partly rooted in the Titanic's failure. As for whether the families of victims were compensated, yes, but the payments were far from generous. The company did face a number of lawsuits, particularly from American families, since the Titanic was heading to New York and had many U.S. citizens on board. In 1916, a settlement was reached in the U.S. courts, where the White Star Line agreed to pay a total of about $664,000 to be divided among the claimants. That's not much, considering the number of victims and the severity of the tragedy. Many families got only a few $100s, and some got nothing at all. Compensation often depended on class and nationality. First-class passengers or their families were more likely to get larger settlements than those in steerage, third class, even though third-class passengers made up the largest number of fatalities. Interestingly, some crew members' families had an especially hard time getting any help. The families of stewards, firemen, and other lower-level workers were often left destitute, since many of those men were the sole breadwinners. There were some charity funds set up in both the US and the UK, and the Titanic Relief Fund in Britain helped provide small amounts of ongoing support to widows and orphans. But, again, these were modest at best. Let's look back to what really happened that night, and if there's someone to blame. Tragedy of the century. The sinking of the Titanic is one of the most famous disasters in history. Not just because of the scale of the tragedy, but also because of how many things had to go wrong for it to happen. The Titanic was marketed as the unsinkable ship, a marvel of engineering and luxury. But that image came crashing down, literally, when the ship hit an iceberg on its maiden voyage and sank within hours. Over 1,500 people lost their lives. So, what exactly happened, and who should take the blame? As it turns out, there isn't just one person or factor to point the finger at. It was more like a perfect storm of arrogance, oversight, bad timing, and even bad luck. Let's start with the iceberg itself. Yes, technically, the Titanic hit an iceberg. And yes, that's what tore open the hull and led to the flooding of 5 of its supposedly watertight compartments. But the iceberg was just the final blow. There were multiple iceberg warnings from other ships in the area that day, some of which were ignored or downplayed. The ship was also traveling at nearly full speed, despite these warnings. It seems almost unbelievable now, but back then, it was a common practice. The prevailing attitude was that the Titanic was so well built it could handle just about anything. This wasn't just optimism, it was hubris. So already we see part of the blame resting on the captain, Edward Smith, and perhaps on the White Star Line company that pressured him to make good time and create publicity. Captain Smith is a controversial figure in Titanic lore. He had a long, respectable career at sea, but his actions on this voyage raise questions. Why didn't he slow down when ice was reported? Why were there no proper drills for lifeboat evacuation? Some argue that he trusted too much in the ship's technology and had become too relaxed near retirement. Others say he was following the company's unspoken orders to make headlines by arriving in New York early. Either way, Smith's choices, whether from overconfidence or pressure, undoubtedly played a role in the disaster. But it's also true that many others were part of this flawed system. Then there's the ship's design. The Titanic had watertight compartments, but the walls didn't go all the way to the top. So when water filled the front compartments, it spilled over into the others like water in an ice cube tray. The ship could stay afloat with 4 compartments flooded, but not 5. It's a design flaw, plain and simple. And that flaw lay at the feet of the shipbuilders and engineers who, for all their brilliance, underestimated what nature could do. Was it greed, a rush to finish, or just bad assumptions? Probably all 3. Some materials used, like the iron rivets in parts of the hull, have since been found to be brittle in cold temperatures, which didn't help matters. The lack of lifeboats is another huge red flag. The Titanic had lifeboats for about 1,178 people, less than half the number on board. Why? Regulations at the time were based on the ship's tonnage, not the number of passengers. That's a failure of maritime law. But White Star Line also didn't want to clutter the deck with too many boats and spoil the view for first-class passengers. Again, image over safety. When the ship was sinking, many lifeboats went out half-empty because the crew hadn't been properly trained and passengers were confused or in denial about how serious things were. It wasn't just a design failure, but also a management failure. Communication issues also added to the chaos. The Titanic's wireless operators were busy sending personal messages for wealthy passengers and didn't prioritize iceberg warnings. In fact, one message from another ship was cut off by the Titanic's wireless operator with a "shut up" because it interfered with paid messages. That moment of arrogance may have cost hundreds of lives. There's also the mystery of the Californian, a nearby ship that saw the Titanic's distress rockets but didn't respond. The Californian's wireless operator had gone off duty, and their crew misinterpreted the rockets as celebratory, not a cry for help. If they had acted, many more people might have been saved. So, who's really at fault here? It's not one person, it's a whole chain of human errors, institutional failures, and cultural arrogance. The Titanic was a product of its time, an age when industrial progress felt unstoppable and when wealthy, powerful men believed their creations were beyond failure. You had a ship designed with blind spots, crew underprepared for disaster, and a society more focused on prestige than prudence. The aftermath. The event sent shockwaves around the world. It wasn't just a big news story, it was a wake-up call. The ship had been hyped as unsinkable, a floating palace full of the latest technology and luxury. So, when it hit an iceberg and sank on its very first voyage, people were stunned. For many, it felt like a betrayal of progress, like the modern world wasn't as safe or advanced as everyone thought. The public reaction was a mix of horror, sadness, and fear. People started questioning how something so terrible could happen on a ship that was supposed to be the pinnacle of engineering. Naturally, this disaster affected the cruise and shipping industry in a big way. At first, yes, people were definitely scared. The idea of taking a cruise across the Atlantic suddenly didn't seem as glamorous or exciting anymore. Newspapers were filled with haunting survivor stories, lists of the dead, and criticisms of the ship's design and safety protocols. Rich or poor, people everywhere realized that sea travel wasn't as safe as they had believed. Ticket sales dropped for a while, and there was a lot of public pressure on ship companies to prove that something like the Titanic couldn't happen again. In response to the public outcry, governments and the shipping industry had to act fast. One major result was the formation of new safety regulations. The Titanic hadn't carried enough lifeboats for everyone on board, which was a horrifying oversight. That changed almost immediately. New international laws required all ships to have enough lifeboats for every passenger and crew member. Regular lifeboat drills became mandatory, and ships had to have proper wireless communication systems operating 24/7 so that they could respond quickly to emergencies. This led to the first International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea in 1914, which set the foundation for modern maritime safety standards. While people were definitely shaken, they didn't give up on sea travel altogether. Over time, public confidence slowly returned, partly because of all the new safety rules and partly because ocean travel was still the only real option for crossing continents. Airlines weren't really a thing yet, so people didn't have many choices. Cruise lines knew they had to win back the public's trust, so they made their ships safer, improved designs, and doubled down on making cruises more comfortable and secure. Eventually, sea travel regained its popularity, and new ships were built with better safety features and more attention to detail. Interestingly, the Titanic disaster also sparked a bit of a fascination with shipwrecks and ocean travel in general. People were both scared and strangely captivated. Some even started collecting Titanic memorabilia or writing books about it. The story of the ship became a kind of legend, part cautionary tale, part mystery, part symbol of lost innocence in the early 20th century. So in a weird way, while the Titanic hurt the cruise industry in the short term, it also pushed the industry to get better and safer in the long run. Sure, it was a tragedy, and despite the horror of it, the story continued into writing, films, and an entire pop culture. Safes were not that much, but sales were massive and unimaginable. How famous and big. Let's unfold the Titanic pop culture. The story of the Titanic isn't just a historical event anymore, it's basically a pop culture legend. Even though the ship sank over a century ago, the tragedy still captures people's imaginations. Maybe it's the drama of it all. The biggest and most luxurious ship of its time, declared unsinkable, only to meet a tragic end on its first voyage. That kind of irony sticks with people. And pop culture hasn't let it go either. From blockbuster movies and haunting songs to countless memes and documentaries, the Titanic has been reimagined, romanticized, and retold in a million ways. Let's be real. When most people today hear Titanic, their first thought is James Cameron's 1997 film. It's hard to talk about the Titanic in pop culture without mentioning that movie. Starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, it turned a historical disaster into a heartbreaking love story. It might not be 100% historically accurate, but it made the tragedy feel personal. People didn't just watch a ship sink. They watched two young lovers caught up in something much bigger than themselves. And let's not forget that iconic "I'm the king of the world" moment, or the endlessly parodied "Draw me like one of your French girls." That film didn't just make money. It made the Titanic a cultural phenomenon all over again. But the influence of the Titanic in pop culture goes way beyond just that one movie. There have been other films, like A Night to Remember from 1958, which focused more on the facts of the disaster. Documentaries have explored everything from how the ship was built to conspiracy theories about why it sank. Even TV shows like Downton Abbey and Doctor Who have had episodes that mention or involve the Titanic. It seems like anytime creators want to add a bit of drama, romance, or mystery, the Titanic is a go-to reference. It's got that timeless, tragic feel that works in almost any setting. And then there's the internet. The Titanic has had a weird second life online, especially in meme culture. You'll see everything from funny jokes using scenes from the movie to sarcastic never-let-go memes. It's wild how something so tragic can also become part of modern humor. But that's kind of what the internet does. It turns everything into content. At the same time, there are also respectful tributes, fan art, and even people writing letters to the real passengers or sharing stories about them. Social media has made it easier than ever to keep the memory of the Titanic alive, in both serious and silly ways. Music, too, has played a role in cementing the Titanic in pop culture. Celine Dion's "My Heart Will Go On" became the anthem of the tragedy, thanks again to the 1997 film. It's one of those songs that instantly brings the ship to mind, even if you weren't alive when the movie came out. The haunting melody, the emotional lyrics, it all adds to the myth of the Titanic. There's something about the combination of romance and loss that just hits people right in the feels, and music has always been a powerful way to express that. The movie. Cameron's Titanic wasn't just a regular blockbuster. It was the blockbuster that redefined what a big Hollywood movie could be, both in terms of money and scale. When it came out in 1997, nobody expected it to do as insanely well as it did, especially since people were already joking about how everyone knows how it ends. The budget was a massive $200 million, which was absolutely huge at the time. And lots of Hollywood insiders thought it was going to be a flop. There were even rumors it might ruin Cameron's career or bankrupt the studios. But instead of sinking, it soared. Titanic made over $2.2 billion at the box office worldwide. That made it the highest-grossing movie ever at the time, and it held that record for more than 12 years, until James Cameron himself topped it with Avatar in 2009. And that $2.2 billion? That's just from the original run. It made even more from re-releases, like the 2012 3D version and a 25th anniversary version in 2023, plus DVD and VHS sales, which were huge back in the day, Blu-rays, digital sales, streaming rights, and all kinds of merchandise. When you add all that up, the movie has probably made close to $3 billion or more over time. So yeah, not just a success, a monster success. James Cameron himself reportedly made over $650 million personally from it. And remember, he gave up his salary at one point to keep the budget in check, betting on himself with back-end profits, and it paid off big time. Now, when it comes to how accurate the movie is, it's kind of a mix. James Cameron is a total perfectionist and a bit of a history nerd, so he actually went to great lengths to get a lot of the small details right. He even made dives to the actual wreck of the Titanic before shooting began. Not just once, but multiple times. He used real footage from those dives in the opening scenes with the submarine and the shipwreck, so those parts are the real deal. The ship's design, the layout of the decks, the interiors, all of that was based on real blueprints and photographs. They recreated entire sections of the ship full scale, down to the wallpaper and the furniture. Cameron also worked with historians to make sure things like the class divisions, the officers' uniforms, the lifeboat arrangements, and the timeline of how the ship sank were accurate. Even the way the ship splits in two. That was something historians had debated for years, and Cameron helped settle that debate with the way he portrayed it based on his own research. He got the physics of the sinking, like how people were pulled under, how the ship tilted, how it broke apart, pretty close to what's believed to have actually happened. Some historians have even said it's the most realistic portrayal of the Titanic disaster ever made, at least visually. That said, the story, Jack and Rose, is completely made up. There was no real Jack Dawson or Rose DeWitt Bukater. Their love story was invented to make the audience emotionally connect with the tragedy. It's like Cameron needed a human hook to make viewers care more about the bigger disaster. And it worked. People left theaters crying, not just because the ship sank, but because they were devastated over Jack and Rose. Some folks were even surprised to learn later that they weren't real. You reached the end of the video. Thanks for watching and subscribe to the channel for more.